Um, there's a very powerful distinction that this film makes between the constitutional and the democratic, right? Uh, we tend to valorize the constitution, and rightfully so. But I remember Jayaprakash Narayan had said about a Sampurna Kranti that this is unconstitutional, but it's democratic. And by practicing this democracy, we can hopefully expand the very idea of what is a constitution and what is constitutional. Vikram, Sameer, what a remarkably subtle film. But a subtle film can also be a misunderstood film. So I was hoping through this conversation that we talk a little bit about the intention, the subtext, if there is one.
It's all coincidental.
Vikram, to begin with, were you drawn to Indira the person or Indira the allegory, Indira the symbol? What is it that drew you to this particular story?
Well, I think first of all, I think there's a, and maybe I mean I was born during the emergency, and I grew up in here in the 80s and the 90s, and I realized that we were never told about the emergency, and there was a big gaping hole in our school textbooks and stuff, and maybe because we've had a Congress government throughout while kind of growing up, that it was sort of like something that was just like shoved under the carpet, like let's not talk about this. It happened. Let's not discuss this. So unless you had family who wanted to talk about it, or you had people who had sort of like whatever, if it wasn't a part of something that you didn't learn out of school, you didn't learn it at all. It's only changed now. So I think one was just a curiosity for me to be able to like just take a deep dive into a period of our very recent history. It's not even that far away, and sort of like just to sort of look at what happened. And as that was happening, I think there was something very fascinating about Indira as the personality. Yes, there is there that she's a protagonist. I mean, she really is. It's like you can't write this kind of stuff. But also that bit in history, like what was it about that period? What brought it to that period of time in our history where what was done was completely constitutional and yet was so wrong. And I thought that was a fascinating sort of like thing to get into that, and to sort of like just see what happened, and just place the facts down. I don't think there's no take, and I think it's subtle, yes, because I think at any point had I taken a stand either way, it would have started to become not just. It's a mirror, and that's pretty much the way I wanted it to be from the beginning. So.
And how did Samir get involved?
Well, actually, Vikram, we met. We were talking about something else, and he said that he'd been working on something, and it's an interesting 3-part docu-series, and that would I like to take a look at it. So I said, yeah, sure, you should send me the link. So he sent me very early rough cuts of 3 episodes, which I watched on a Sunday afternoon, one after the other, very quickly. And I got back to him and I told him that, yeah, I mean, what seems to be the holdup? And he says that it needs a producer in a studio. And I said, okay, so we are good to go. And so we got involved. Primarily because, much like what he's saying, I'm a little older than him. So I was a child during the emergency. Again, I don't know anything about it. It's a black hole. But Ramchandra Gu has written this book. He's written books on Gandhi, and one of his really nicer but lesser known books is a book called India After Gandhi. So it's a book from 48 onwards. And when you think about it, there is very little we know about contemporary Indian history. We know everything about the freedom movement, and then it sort of almost stops there. And then nothing happens after that of note. I mean, it's taught in very simplistic ways. So there's a lot of contemporary history of India that should be told. And this is a great story. This is a terrific story. I didn't know most of this, and we haven't heard of it, haven't seen it. So I think it's important to tell stories like this. And the way he had done it, telling it so, well, matter of fact, factually, no right, no wrong, it is what it is. And it's good lessons to learn, that public memory is short. You like a strong leader, and trains must come on time. So, Jan Hit mein jari.
Vikram, can you talk a little bit about the way you constructed this initially 3-part, and now, of course, what we're seeing is a film. What does it mean to direct a documentary when so much of what you're working with is archival footage and animation? Was the script being developed parallel to the archives that you were getting, or did you write the script and then search the archives, or did you get the archives and write the script?
It's been a very fluid process throughout. We had outlines so we initially had 4 episodes. It started off as a 4-episode piece, and then we realized that the 4th episode, which was originally supposed to be the full comeback of Indira, which we realized that actually we don't really need that 4th episode. Once the Janata Party fails, the movie is over. I mean, or the moment is over. So it was very fluid. We had outlines, and then on those outlines we would say, okay, we want this kind of footage. We would look for the footage. We would see the footage, put together rough things, and then work the VO. So the script was essentially the voiceover. The script was essentially the narrative of how we're taking from one to the other, knowing that there's this footage here and that footage there. And I was the one actually doing the voiceover eventually, and I got tired of my own voice, which is why Swanand is over here. Much against the wishes of some of my team members. They were like, no, your voice is better. So it was very fluid. We had I don't know if any of you use Notion as a software. It's fantastic. It's like this database building software where you can like link back and link forward. So we were very geeky, and we went in and we built up this whole sort of like transcript with it, and there was like columns of this and columns of that, and and eventually then it's taken a while to kind of get to where it finally is.
Can you talk about the procurement of archives? Because if there's one thing a country's not good at, among many things, it's our archives.
Absolutely. No, we're not good at archives at all. All these archives, in fact, all the good archives are all BBC, Getty, Pathe, Associated Press. Films Division, NFDC has some stuff, but a lot of it is just propaganda movies that were made at the time. So a lot of the stuff we've taken from any of the local archives are all propaganda. The real archives, and not only that, it's the FD and NFDC archives are in terrible shape. When we actually got the scans, we discovered that the stuff we took off YouTube was actually in better condition and was better quality than the final scans we received from the agencies, and it was a bit of a shock. Whereas, so look, the intent was like, if you want to make it definitive, then you got to have the definitive footage. So went out, we looked at all the footage we have internationally, and the footage that we have of Indira, which is from the European archives, is amazing. It's fantastic. And it's in such good quality. It's like when we saw the final, like the 4K scans come in, it was good enough to eat. It was so delicious. And you're like, man, if only we could keep our archives like this, it would be wonderful. So the intent was, yes, let's go out and let's try and get the best archives we possibly can. And then whatever we can't, let's bridge those gaps with animation. Let's use animation as a really interesting tool for so many moments in our history, which there is no. The court case, for example, is something that we don't have there's no archival footage of that. But it's such an important moment. That whole court case is such an important moment in our modern history. How do you can't just like not. So that's why, animation came in as a way. And then we found it was so interesting that we then used it in more places.
Talk about the decision to start in 1942. And this is something that the first time I watched it at Dharamshala, we were all talking about why starting and ending it at this particular point. What are the omissions that you're making? Because you have to make omissions while making a film. Why starting at 1942? Even in 1948, when the Constituent Assembly debates were taking place, there was a debate about the very part of the Constitution that was allowing for the emergency, and people resisted that. And it was Ambedkar who said, we need this. This needs to be in our Constitution. For example, even in 1959, I think, when Indira Gandhi dismissed the Kerala government, right? It's not that she suddenly became a dictator in the 70s. She had this tendency, and this was under Nehru, right? Nehru gave his assent. So can you talk a little bit about this process of omission that is essential because you're creating a narrative, but complexity and coherence sometimes can feel like a trade-off?
No, excellent question. And I think that, look, I think the the Constitution is the Indian Constitution, especially, is we all want it to be perfect, and we all believe it's perfect, and yet it was formed at a time of great strife in India, and we said like they were meeting in Delhi at a point in time when there was riots on the streets. Everybody's feeling a little bit unsafe. Now, if you're going to get 300 people to sort of say, let's make the constitution for a free India in that moment in time, they are going to look at their surroundings and they are going to use that, and which is exactly what happened. So a lot of these checks and balances that are in place, which is exactly what Indira used in to call the emergency, are those things that were put into place during that time because of the conditions outside. Had the conditions been more peaceful, I believe, and a lot of people believe, that these wouldn't have been in place. It would have been a situation where the fact that you don't have to worry about a situation. It's a peaceful country, but you know you're not. And so therefore, how do you address that in case something like this happens all over again? And I thought that was really important. I thought that was very important to place the fact that we love our constitution, and it's a very, very important document, but it's not perfect. And these are the situations. And again, I couldn't go into too much detail. Gyan Prakash's book is another fantastic document that talks about this in such beautiful terms when he speaks about the debates that would go back and forth, and how when certain people protested, they would water down certain kind of things, and that watering down had a domino effect that would come downwards. And it was beautiful, but again, not for this film. And even the dismissal of the Kerala state government is early draft, actually, script. I mean, the cut had it. We had the fact that she dismissed the Kerala state government in 1959 with against Nehru's wishes, but with his permission eventually. And a lovely factoid, which I kind of miss when I see it right now, is the fact that in Nehru's entire tenure as Prime Minister, he used Article 356, which is basically President's rule, 8 times. Indira used it 26 times in the time that she was Prime Minister, which is very telling when you sort of talk about a sort of dictatorial mindset. Again, just lovely facts, but you realize that at some point in time, and this also brings it back to some of the things we've said earlier, is that who's the audience for this? And I was pretty clear that I wanted it to be for everybody. It's not for scholars. It's not for beginners either, but it's not for scholars either. I wanted it to be the perfect thing where if you don't know anything about it, you can watch it and enjoy it and learn something and go home. But if you also know a lot about the emergency, it's also a great deep dive. It's also a great kind of refresher to sort of like do it. So in that sense, it sort of filled both. And that's where you sort of take the decisions that, look, is this information too granular? Are we too sort of like this? Where is this really required in the larger scheme of things? So a lot of our second cut, third cut process was these moments, was being able to say like, okay, this is not required because in the larger narrative, it's not necessary.
You'd said that you want this film to feel like a mirror. But, if a dirty body is looking at the mirror, they're going to look back at, a dirty body. Are you afraid of this film being misunderstood?
I mean, every film is misunderstood, so it's not...
I mean, you know exactly what I mean by this question, though. There's a very specific way this film can be misunderstood and can fall into the hands of a certain narrative.
I think by the time the film ends, I don't think that misunderstanding is... I think it's pretty clear on the last few supers where I stand, at least, on this one, and I don't think there's any misunderstanding on that. But I do think there is... And to my earlier point, I think at some point in time, I am aware of that, and I am aware of there could be potential hijacking of it. There could be a certain amount of sort of like pushing the film on a different narrative. I know it might happen, and I think that's not the price one has to pay. It sounds like, oh my god, it's like, but I think it's okay for the sake of neutrality, which I think is in the larger scheme of things. I think that is far more important to be able to say, let's keep our own personal feelings a little bit at the back, and being able to say like, this is what happened factually and this is the way it did. You cannot sugarcoat what happened and say that misunderstood people or whatever. It happened and it was wrong, and that's just the way it is.
Right. Thank you all for being such a lovely audience. Vikram, Samir, for your artistry, your clarity, your insights. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.